Hello, I'm Daniel. I will be going over how to simulate the Rift's Palladium rules within the Fantasy Ground platform. Fantasy Grounds is an online platform where you can play various games over the internet with other people, either as a GM or as a player. For many years, I've been looking for a Rift's rule set to be created for Fantasy Grounds. I haven't found one yet. However, the MoreCore rule set by Damned comes pretty close. I'm going to go over the various settings in the MoreCore rule set and the most recent extension to show what options we have and what limitations we still have. Now, first of all, you have to download the actual core set and the extension if you want to use the extension. The core set it goes in the rule sets here. You can see that I actually have it right here. This is the most recent copy that I've seen. And the extensions go right here. And this is the extension that you may or may want to use depending on what you decide. I'll go over the benefits and the drawbacks of that. So simply open up Fantasy Grounds, click on that, drag them into those folders. When you create a campaign, you'll activate those. You'll select the core rule set, activate the extension if you want to by clicking on the rules, and then you'll start. Now, what I have open here is the basic MoreCore rule set. This is the character that I basically created, which I'll be using as a template. You can see that this has basically all the same functionality that the extension will have that I'll go over later, except it doesn't have classes. Classes pretty much hold your OCCs and your races, and without it, the classes that I created earlier will give you an error. Now, there's ways of getting around this, and I'll go over that later when I go over the classes and alternatives to using the classes. Now, this is the MoreCore with the extension. As you can see, there's been an extensive redesign for aesthetics, and you actually now have classes. Of course, you have to go into the library and click on them to actually have it show. But here they are. And you can put in races, OCCs, and I also have something that I just put for NA, because once you actually drag it onto your sheet, sometimes it's difficult to actually remove it. So it's easier to just replace it with an NA. Throughout all of these variations of tables, stories, items, roles, abilities, I strongly recommend that you use categories such as OCCs, races. Pretty much you have to create them, just create a group, and then you either have to drag them in, drag these items into the group from another, either for the character sheet or another class, or create them on the spot from there. When they're empty, they compress here. They compress like this, and when they're full, they look normal, whether they're locked or unlocked. Now, what this extension does is he added a little box here for your class, your title, and your level, and some saving throws. Now, this is a problem for those playing Rifts or Palladium because we don't have these saving throws, and these classes are hard-coded into the database, and they don't match anything from Rifts or Palladium. So what I did is I exercised my very limited coding skills, and I deleted these boxes here, and the classes and the titles, and I just left the empty frame for classes. Now, if you actually have the coding skills and the patience, you can go into that back end and populate those databases with Rifts-related classes and races, and in which case it'll be rather nice because when you drag these on here, it'll come up with a little message saying, you know, what increased for that level, but it actually won't change your character sheet anyway. So I chose not to do that. The simplest way was simply to remove this. All right, here is the extension I've reloaded with those fields removed. It also had a AC box with modifiers. Those of you familiar with Rifts and Palladium would know that there is no AC. There's only armor rating. Basically, if you roll 5 or higher, you hit something. And if it's less than the AR rating, your armor rating, you hit the armor and the armor takes damage. And if you hit above that, then you actually hit the person. If you're playing in an MDC game or your character is MDC, it doesn't really matter because anything that with AR, it would be SDC. And if it hits you, if you roll above 5, it hits you and you take damage. Now, because this is an extension, it's easy to remove those parts. If Damned actually moves that functionality into the core rule set, it would be more difficult to actually replace that. All right, so I'm going to go over what these data sheets actually do, the fields. So as you can see, there's there's a hand-to-hand box here with you can identify basic attacks. One of the things you have to realize is that when you start the program, there's a dice pool, and every time you roll dice, everything goes in here. I don't actually know the purpose of this, so I usually turn it off because otherwise you can't actually roll any dice. All right, so double click on that. You do an attack roll, 1d6, 1d20 plus 6. You just type in what the attack is. I have a 66 in front of that for some reason. Let's see if I can, there we go. Easily edited, but because sometimes when you backspace or delete, you might get this whole field. So it's easier to just have a notebook or a Word document up and just have these all entered into the Word or text editor and then paste it into here, as opposed to putting these in individually. So this rolled an attack roll. It does not calculate whether you hit automatically. The GM will have to do that and say, okay, you hit, roll damage. Then you hit the type in the damage that the player rolled off his character sheet. And these would be the most common attacks that you would do. Now, there's other ways of doing attacks, which I will go over. But for just a quick typing and clicking for things that you do over and over again, this is very convenient. Now, there's a drawback to this. And if you go over here, it will scroll down, but you actually cannot click on these, because when you click on that, it bounces up and you click on what actually is here. So let's try that again. So if I double click on here, it bounced up and I actually clicked on what was the field up here. So if you can possibly avoid it, do not go over here. It does scroll, but once it's down there, anything below that line is useless. Now, the base sheet for a character is hit points, defense, wounds, THAC0, C5, and int initiative. These are easily renamed to something more relevant to Palladium. Now, these fields actually connect to the tracker, the combat tracker. And you would have to rename these as well. Easily done here. Wounds is probably the only thing that I think is auto-calculated. So you put in the number of wounds, and this little icon here will go green, orange, red, depending on what fraction of this is. That's as far as the auto-calculation does. It doesn't do hits, it doesn't calculate damage. And we'll go into the tracker and maps in a little bit because it has some neat functionality for those of you who actually use maps. All right, over here we have the attributes. These are pretty much programmable on the fly. I have entered these as the score, skill bonus, intelligence roll, that's specific for the IQ, for the MA, the ability score, trust, intimidate, and if you just look at this, you can see that these are the variables P1, P2, P3, score, skill bonus, and intent, and these are these fields here. These are easily turned on and turned off just by clicking hide the parameter or not. They'll still be there, but they'll be hidden if you don't want to use those. So if you want to use hidden variables to calculate something, you can simply turn those off and keep those on file. Also, you can drag other characteristics into this field. So here, for some reason, I had P3. I think I was just experimenting with this. P3 dragged into here. Oh, wait. There we go. I just had P3 dragged into here for no particular reason. I'm not using that variable. But if I do P2, it'll actually show you that it got updated. It's very useful for calculating things from other fields. I use that extensively for the saving throws. But each one of these has something different. Here I have a perception roll. Let's make this a little bit thinner so I can see the display to show the rolls at the same time. So click on that and it rolls your perception. So basic die 20 plus your bonus for your intelligence roll, and voila. Here this is trust and intimidate. So it's simply your D100 plus your trust intimidate, which is actually in percentages. And that shows up immediately as a percentage there. So roll that. And it'll be up to the GM to see if there's any modifiers for the NPC. And basically, throughout all of these, the ability score is defined that way. Here is speed, and you can see that even though I have parameters P2, P3 for meters per minute and miles per hour, I didn't actually use these because if you could see these, you'll see that, it's like, I can't even read it. It's like 220 meters per second, meters per minute, and something like 360 miles per hour, some absurd numbers. So the limit of these fields is that they do not auto expand, and once you get past 2 digits, you start to have overlap, and it's very, very difficult to read. So it's one of those limitations you're going to have to work around. If you actually have some programming skills, you probably could go in and resize these a little bit. And the character sheet does resize a little bit, but those individual things do not. So that's good for, skill descriptions that you can't read, like down here, basic. Okay, now I can read it. But it's not so good for, just a flat out, like, I want to know how many miles per hour, or other things that just like exceed the scope of the box. All right, let's go over the saving throws. These, the way I have it laid out, this is the additional bonus for whatever roll I'm making. I only have the additional bonuses because inside here, I have dragged the the base characteristic value from the stats here. For example, this coma versus death comes from this second field here. So I simply dragged this into here, and it became variable A. So I have a D100 plus A plus P1 is my miscellaneous bonus, which is 0 in here. And you can see that as you do the formula down here, it shows up here. So D100 plus 38 from that physical endurance field, plus 0 additional bonuses. Dodge is similar. This one came from physical prowess. The ability score is 22. The bonus versus raw parry and dodge is 4. So, and I have some bonuses from some combat skills, which equals 6. So it ends up P1 is 6, A is 4, and simply click that and compare that to the enemy's strike, and that's whether you parry or dodge. You can do this with almost everything down here. These are your typical parry saving throws. There should be a circle, a circle saving throw, which is a little bit more difficult than wards, I believe, but I don't have that here. That'd be easily added. You would simply drag that out, copies that, and then you would change that to circles. And the saving throw, it doesn't compare to a value here. The GM would have to do that. There is something called saving throw, which I instituted with the skills. But if you have constant saves that you're going to be saving against, like I think wards is 14 and circles is 16 off the top of my head. I don't remember what possession is, but psionics depends whether you're a non-psionic, a minor, major, or a master. So you could use this same functionality, which saves versus a specific value. Here, I have put in the fields. P1 is the skill level. So basically, it's the class sometimes. As you know, you can get OCCs at various levels of that OCC skills at various levels of a class. For example, at Shifter, you get a new skill at level 4 or level 8. So when you get that, it starts out at a different level than all your other skills. So this would be the level of that skill, which may or may not equal your class level. This is your bonus per level, and this is manually calculated. I tried to do it automatically, but unfortunately, this does not handle multiplying very well. So as soon as I tried to multiply that level, that 5% per level times this level, your skill level, it started to stop reading it, and it just gave me nonsense results. So if anyone does get that functionality working, I would love to see it. But so far, I've only been able to get this to be manually entered. You have to calculate it every time the skill goes up, and then it compares it. And of course, it says saving throw. As a side note, this is an example of what I tried to do to automate that so that it would inherit the skill level from your mind major shifter. Of course, this makes it more difficult in that you get it at various levels of that class. But even the basic roles would not really be handled because I tried the various variables on each side, but as soon as it does a multiplier, it just doesn't read anything after that. Now, as you've seen before, the character sheet expands and contracts. When it expands down, only the bottom expands. You can expand off to the side, but usually real estate's at a premium, so because you might have a map or another character sheet or an NPC, so you'll probably want to keep it compressed as best you can. Different resolutions. On some screens, this will be on the entirely on the monitor. In this case, the resolution I have just happens to, hang over. Now, there are... I originally made this character sheet all on here. It was easy to add roles, but there's some limitations doing that. When you make tables, if you make the saving throws, attributes, skills on here, and then drag them over here so that you have a compilation of your skills like this, you will find that when you update it here, it will suddenly be updated over here as well. And when you delete it on your character sheet, it will be deleted on the table. So you don't want to link it that way. The best way to do this is to use the tables last. So go to your roles and create your abilities, your skills. Here I have a category for skills. And once you do it here, every time you drag it over here, it will create a copy, and they will not be connected. So you can change things here, or you can change things here, and they will not be connected. So wiping out one will not affect another. And from here, you can drag these roles to your table to compile various things. For example, Um, I have some strength damage here for supernatural, full power, full strength, power punch, restrained punch, and I made a table, and I dragged them all in here. And when you make a character, you'll probably be in one of those categories. They generally won't change unless you've got a superpower or a various spell that raises your strength. But whatever's relevant, you can either drag this table onto your character sheet and use that for reference, or you can drag these individual things onto your character sheet so you can roll the damage. Now, the problem with that is that only specific fields can be rolls. These two fields here can be rolls. These cannot be rolls. You can't roll anything from here. These are just references. So you can, like, show your class, show your race, show your moves, but you can't actually roll anything from those. So if you actually want to roll something, you would actually need to drag this into one of those fields. Any of these fields, everything on the first page is pretty much rollable. And then you can roll an attack from that. Supernatural restrain punch, 1d6. So you'll have to decide on where to put that. I kind of wish there was another box on this page for rolls. And that would be fairly easy to modify in an extension, but I haven't done that yet. That might be a project for the future. That would be pretty easy to do. The extensions, even using my limited copy and pasting expertise, that wouldn't be that hard to do. So let's close this. Another thing that you should keep in mind is that categories are your friend. For your rolls here, you're going to end up with a lot of rolls. Look, just for, like, it's just supernatural strength table, and you're going to have a non-supernatural strength table probably. You're going to end up with saving throws, skills, spells. When they're all on, in one field, one list, it goes on and on and on. So you want to create these subcategories. I think I already went over that. And make sure everything is in its little cubbyhole. Otherwise, it will get confusing very fast. Tables, as I mentioned, is a great way to form groups of things. For example, I have made skill groups, military. Unlock that. Create a bunch of these things, and I'm not even sure which one of these militaries. Let's just say that this one is, this one is, this one is. So when your OCC says that you get, like, 3 of any skill, and one of the groups listed is all military at a plus 10 skill bonus, you can open up that table, go to your skill groups, and you'll have something there. Basically, it just automates. It's not really automation. It just groups them into a convenient location so that you can just open it up and drag it to your character sheet. Languages are kind of neat here, in that you can make chat to other people in your group in any language that's in the system. And what's in the system is, if you go to options, go to languages, you just enter a new language. All right, let's add a language. Chinese. Pretend there's only one Chinese language. And here we go. And now it's here. Now, as a player, they'd only see the languages that they have on their character sheet, but this is being opened as a GM, so I get everything. Currencies are similar. These are the currencies that are identified. And on your combat tracker, usually these will not be shown. The hit points in SDC would not be shown. I have turned these on in right here. So this would be column 4 and column 5. And you can change the colors of them. All right, so a nice feature of this is spell tracking. Unfortunately, it only has one resource. So this is actually meant for if you have a pool of points for level 5 spells, level 6 spells, level 7 spells, and then you could put, my level 3 spells are 10, my level 4 spells are 40, and every time I double click this, it decrements it from my currents, and it identifies that, what legion is your character is using. We have ISP and we have PPE, so you have to choose which one to use. I decided to use PPE as for this tally. You can see I renamed this little tally to PPE and this one to ISP. These are not automatically entered here. So you have to enter this as your pool. Now, one of the nice things it did have is it can keep track of it can keep track of this one tally here. Enter your maximum, you enter your current, and you can do a /spellpoints P3. P3 is the spell cost. So you can see the fields here. Hover over it. The first one's range, and you can change that to feet, miles, whatever. It's easily done in these fields here. The second one is duration. The third one is actually the cost, and that's actually what you use. So /spellpoints, this P3 field, and every time you click on that, it will tell you what the player is doing, and it will decrement that value. So let's decrement 4 points for that, 2 points for that. Now you can only do that spell point tally or a roll. So for these, I have decided not to do rolls. You'll have to do that manually down here for any spell that actually is an attack. So let's see. Let's see if I can find an attack. Call Lightning. All right, Call Lightning. You click on that. It doesn't do an attack roll. It does like a cost. You'd have to actually open that up and see. All right, it does 66. All right, I actually found a way to do the 66 actually fairly simply. So simply drag these into your dice pool. I dragged 5, then I drag another one, and then I double click on that and I've rolled 66. So for the non common numbers, you would create your own dice pool and then just roll it there. That's an odd workaround, but I have actually haven't tried to roll the uncommon dice numbers until now. Now, if you're running your own campaign, I would expect that you would enter the flavor text yourself, um, or have the players enter it, or just have the book open. So you can go as far as you want with this, um, but this is just the basic framework. Now for psionics, as I said, I didn't have a power pool over here to work with. I chose to work with PPE for this. If you are only a psionicist or only a spellcaster, then you can use spell points for psionics as well. The benefit of this is that I was able to actually use the die rolls here. Let's see, for Mind Bolt. 8d6. That was a lot of dice. I'm not sure why it showed that many dice at first, but it looks like the count's right. So for psionics, we just used this as the die rolling mechanism. The range, the duration, and the cost are the same. You know, some of those things that don't have the standard functions, Mind Block Auto Defense is a permanent psionic point loss that that you pay when you first get it, and then it's on all the time. So the range is at 0 in feet. So some of these didn't actually apply. So I did not include all the fields. The fields are easily turned off and on just by hiding these. You can rename them on the fly. It's individual for each role, so it's not going to be inherited by another number or another thing. One of the interesting things is that you have you have a slash die command, the number of dice to roll, and anything after that is simply stated in as text. So you type this, and it would say duration in minutes, because that's what I have there afterward. Duration in minutes, semicolon, object read, and then like 8 minutes. I actually tried to get rid of these extra tallies, but my programming skills, what little I have, was not up to the challenge. So these just stayed there. Ideally, you would have a separate current and max for PPE and ISP. I was not able to get that up and running. I chose that one of these fields for generic data would be for your classes. I actually drag that in there before I filled out those. So let's drag one of these over. That should be fully filled out. There we go, fully filled out. The class feature is fairly nice because it gives you several things that you can fill out. You can see that when I hit the edit button, you have description, primary attributes. This is kind of for a generic system, so it doesn't really fit exactly. You could go in and change the names of these fields, but they're not that far off, so I didn't bother doing that. These 7 fields, you cannot drag links in, but you could drag a link from into the description, and you can drag links into here, your XP levels if you wanted to for some reason. You could drag into your saving throws. You can drag them into higher levels. I simply put in the class descriptions. This is just garbage information. It actually is not at all accurate. Starting abilities, starting spells, choose 3, abilities at additional levels, and these are just dragged in from the roles, although you could drag them in from the tables as well. Probably dragging them in from the roles would be more ideal. So you got OCC related skills, choose at some levels. As I said, this does not match any actual class. I just entered this as at random. Secondary skills, choose at whatever levels. And there's a bunch of other things, I think, for shifters and races. Sometimes when you add things, things get cut off. I'm not sure exactly why that happens. It's usually just the text field, so it's easily fixed. I think I've actually updated this since then. Let's see. Classes. Yes, I've updated the name here. Let's just drag in the new one. Let's see. Delete the old one. And I don't think I really made that many changes. Now, the new extension has classes, which is nice. The description doesn't change that much. And of course, I had to delete the extra fields on the first page. And the automation that didn't really fit with any of the classes for Rifts or Palladium. But it doesn't actually export anything. So here there's an export button here. It will export your tables, your classes. Not your classes. It will export your tables, effects, encounters, random images, items, modifiers, locations, NPCs, organizations, parcels, pre-generated characters, quests, roles, stories, story templates, tables, and vehicles into a module that you could use on another computer. However, it does not export classes, and it does not export notes. I mentioned notes because I was experimenting making classes and races under the notes, and you can absolutely do that. You can have descriptions, tables, links. These are empty, but spells, and everything works here. You can then drag these onto your character sheets when you do character creation. Make sure you put in your OCC bonuses, but it will not be exported because it's not one of the options in the base course system. However, story is. So you can make classes and races in here, and you can see that it's got the same exact functionality. Now, if you actually have stories and plots that you keep track of here, it could be more complex. Not everything has to be public. The GM can make these public or not public. Actually, I don't see a button for public here. For notes, there's a button on whether it's public or not. Okay, that makes it a little bit more complex. For notes, there is no way to organize them in groups, which could make it very complex. Ironically, you can make it public or private, but you can't export notes. You can export stories. You cannot make them non-public, though, apparently. And you can put them in groups. So you could make your class as a group, your race as a group, and your plot-related stories another group. I suggest strongly to identify and stick to naming conventions, otherwise it will be confusing. All right, so the other things, these are all general data things that you can click links, but they will not be roles. Down here, you have your story. You have to beware, accidentally dragging things. As you drag it in here, it'll say things. So you can make up a story, put in your notes of your favorite treasures or your your desired treasures in the future. Your life story, which actually should go over here, I suppose. Let's see. All right, so if you wanted to, where is that thing? I put it in notes. All right. All right, so notes will actually not go into story. How about that? We'll go there, though. All right. And images. So here, your images, you can draw something. You should be able to import images from, or pictures from places. Yeah, you should be able to do that. I believe you would just be dragging pictures into here to choose from, and then creating them here. This comes with populated with some battle maps. They're generally all too large, so you would resize them into something more reasonable. This seems like a good time to go over the battle map. So one of the first things that you do when you start a character or start a game, let me show you from scratch, is the GM should drag the characters onto the tracking sheet. That's the first thing that you should do. And then from here, you can drag them onto the map, select them, and use the control scrolling feature to resize them. And when I was playing this game, we never used a battle map, but a lot of people like battle maps. It's a little bit trickier with rifts because the movement scales is like not in feet. So my 60 speed is not in a foot movement. But if you choose to do it that way and you have some way of keeping track of people's movement, then you could absolutely do that. And the players can click on their character, then control click on the other character, and they have it targeted here. You can target multiple characters that way. And then you do an attack roll, and ideally, in some of the other rule sets, they actually will calculate the damage. This will not calculate the damage, but it will identify who you attacked. So there's no confusion about, oh, I meant to attack the other guy, which will probably happen anyway, as the player forgot to retarget another enemy. Your initiative can be rolled here. And your movement an order of player and NPCs can be done. So one person acts, you move to the next combat track round, move to the next one, restarts the initiative, and it keeps track of your rounds. And if you start a new one, you'd have to put that immediately. If everyone loses an action, you can hit the next round. In Rifts and Palladium, everyone will have a different number of attacks. So that is actually pretty important to keep track of. All right, so on this page, this is where I've chosen to keep track of the classes, the hit points, MDC and SDC. You can use it to track other things as well. You can put a little bit more detail about which class is active or inactive, which one you're applying your experience to. And if you have any powers that affect MDC or SDC, like for example growth, or if you had with metal another superpower or a spell that added hit points or something else, you could add another field here for to keep track of that as well. None of this is trackable. The items here can be inherited and calculated through another field, just drag and drop. These cannot be, as far as I know. This has a sheet for abilities now, and these abilities come with their own little entry. These are limited these are not roles, these are just flavor text. So you can't you can't make an ability with roles, you can only do it with flavor text. This page though can either accept these abilities, or if you actually want to use drag roles, or say spells or powers that you've accumulated, you could. Let's see where that went. Right, all right, it went over here. And it does keep that information. However, you cannot roll it from here. You can open it and look at it, but you can't roll it from here. You'd actually have to roll that from one of these fields here, or one of these two fields. All of these are data, are various types of data. And although these accept links, they will not roll links. Inventory is as you said, inventory. It starts off empty. There's actually no items in the game, in the system yet. I experimented putting some abilities in here too. It does work, but it's just flavor text. So you might as well put those in the abilities field if you just want flavor text. You can't roll anything from here. This just filled up with items, which I've made a few of just for examples. And there's a currency which you've identified. If you've identified these correctly under the combat tracker, sorry, not the combat tracker, the party sheet. Right, again, you have to drag the characters onto the party sheet. You can identify marching order. If you make up encounters and parcels Um, you can drag on the rewards onto here, drag on the dollars from the encounters from here onto here, and it will distribute, keep track of the party inventory, and distribute it as loot. And same thing during you make up encounters. It keeps track of the XP for the encounters, and you, at the end of the thing, you award them the experience for the night, or the week, or the adventure, whatever. So you can keep track of all of that. But that means that you would actually have to create the encounters and parcels. So you don't have to do that. You can do that manually, or if you want to actually make a module, you can do that. I haven't done that here because it's been, I don't have a game, a Rifts game going on at the moment, and haven't had one for years. So this is pretty much a thought experiment for me. Now the next part is something I'm not exactly sure of because I haven't really used, but there are modifiers in the game. Okay, so I wasn't able to make the modification work as I thought I would, but you can make the effects work. And let me see if this works like yes, okay, so you have an effect. It has a number of duration in the, attack rounds, and it will decrement every time you do a new attack round until it's gone. So the effects do work. Let's see, if you had it at 0, does that make it infinite? Yes, if it's 0, it's infinite. So say someone had a immunity to fire. You just set it at 0 and keep it on there as a reminder that fire attacks won't work. You can identify things as friendly, neutral, hostile. And this will be on the changed on the map too. All right, so on the final page is notes. You can see that there's a place for class, alignment, age, height, weight, experience, required to the next level, and the level. You can pretty much ignore this. You could actually modify the extension to replace this information with something more useful that's not on the main page. You know, in a game that you have multiple classes, you know, the fact that you only have one, maybe you define this as your active one. You can do whatever you want or ignore it. You can have a description. These are where your languages are. If they match exactly what you input, then those are the languages that will appear on the character's drop down. If you misspell that, and they do not match the languages that you've set in the system, then it won't work. These I've put in manually, just under notes, origin, alignment, true name. You can put anything you want there. All right, so this pretty much ends what I wanted to go over with. The base rule set and the extension to show how it can work with Rifts and Palladium, how you get into the characters, As you can see, there are some things, small things that are automated. A lot of things require that the GM will keep track of. But there's a combat tracker for this for the entire party. So they still have to do the math, but it will keep things pretty much moving much faster. And it's an option other than Roll20 and the other online games, which seem to be a little bit harder to customize, but maybe that's just because I'm unfamiliar with them. I hope to have a link to MoreCore's rule set, and I'll talk to Damned and to see if he's okay with me distributing the modified extension. And I'll have the character sheet with the layout so that you can see how it's organized and where things go. One last thing for the portraits. When you start a character, you will actually see that there is no portrait. You simply click on here, and if you want to add your own little pictures, you can click on that and just drag them straight into this folder. Or if you want to use one of the pictures that come with it, these are the free default pictures. At least I think they are. I don't think I include my own. So these should be the basic. Actually, maybe they are the pictures of my own modules I've downloaded. But you can click whatever picture you wanted, or drag in your own.